them and essentially create a roadmap of how we want to evolve that journey so that we're making it a better experience. And then the third way is tactically, which is much more like understanding, pulling out a touch point from that journey. So we understand the touch points are the different connections where a customer interacts with the company. And now with the journey map, you have some insight at a particular touch point of whether that's working well, whether it's not working well, whether there's a missed opportunity, or whether it's a real pain point. So you pull that touch point out, which becomes sort of the user story, the thing you want to design to support. In a way, that's the thing that you say, okay, we want to support the transactional part right here. We want to support the ability to get a refund. I mean, that's a touch point, is that I need to get a refund with a company. Imagine a big box retailer where they sell lots of products. What is the experience when you need to return a product? Is it a really awful thing that will leave a bad impression about the company? Or do you make that experience in a way where you come away pleased and sort of evangelizing that experience? So that product return is the touch point that you think about pulling out of the journey and wanting to design for. And so tactically, when you pull that out, you can do that and think about what you want to design for, but you have a lot more contextual information now. You kind of know what the person is feeling, thinking, and doing. And you also sort of have that DNA of the whole journey in it as well. So organizationally, for your understanding how it affects your organization, strategically understanding how you can now plan to support the improved experience over 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, whatever it is. And then tactically taking out those touch points, and one output is often design principles. Like, what do we now know that can influence the future design? And I think those ways are the ways that you can kind of start to see the experience map put into action.
So one of the things I've sort of been hearing is that, there seems to be a commoditization of different companies in terms of they all sort of look the same, and I'm wondering whether that's giving rise to these experience maps or journeys and things to sort of take that outside-in approach. And I'm just wondering how that sits also with the companies going through this North Star experience, as you sort of explain that, who are we and what do we actually stand for? How do we do what we do? And what I'm seeing at the moment is both of those things are getting more visibility. I just wondered what your take on that in terms of, yes, okay, we need to have a customer viewpoint, but also who are we and how do we differentiate ourselves as the how we do something?
I think it's a really good point, and we've seen that used, and it relates to your previous question, which I kind of got sidetracked in explaining the ways it's used. So when we see a top-down approach, that usually means at some executive level, they're understanding that I need to create a sort of more cohesive relationship across my different silos or business groups. And then the bottom-up approach is usually there's people who are the boots on the ground, like product managers and project managers, who are realizing we're working kind of in a broke system and I need to kind of evangelize creating something like this to help unify us. But from that kind of unique value proposition standpoint and understanding how to use this in a way to avoid commoditization, I tend to try to break experience maps out into three parts. And one part is what I call the lens. And the middle part is the actual sort of model of the journey, the thing that, if you look at a journey map, has kind of the lines and the squiggles and that bit. And then the last part are sort of the takeaways. And so the two parts that kind of sandwich that model, the lens, is, I think, very important because it helps you look through that lens at what your experience should be that will be unique to your company. And what I mean that is the lens can be a number of things. Sometimes it could be your persona on which that this journey represents. But a lot of times I use a value proposition or a set of like experience principles or the kind of the mission or the pillars that are meant to define the company. So usually a company has in its mind how it thinks it's differentiated. And ideally they give some time to understand like what is our unique value proposition that we have out to the world that we want to follow through. As we know, a brand is a certain type of promise, right? Of setting that expectation that we're setting an expectation of what kind of experience you would have if you engaged with us as a company. And so when you're looking at an experience map, you're trying to model whether or not you're delivering upon that promise and you're delivering upon that mission statement, those set of guiding principles, that value proposition. When you have a persona, usually you have those key takeaways or those key quotes that are essentially representing how you can meet their needs. Like, oh, I'm worried about this. And so then you're hopefully your company is a solution to that problem. So even a persona is a representation of the values or that distinct differentiator that you hope your company stands for. So you can't necessarily take a company that believes it's a commodity or doesn't care that it's a commodity and doesn't necessarily think of spend the time to really understand what their unique positioning is or their unique value proposition. But if a company does care about that and they do that, then you have that lens, which is the means at which you look at that journey, and that could be that unique value proposition. And then you can measure the journey against that. And you can say, like, are we fulfilling that? You know, we might be fulfilling it when they actually use the product, but when they call customer support, they're having this awful experience, and that's degrading that unique value proposition for us. The other part of that sandwich was the takeaways, and I often call that the moral of the story. So people are looking at this journey, and hopefully it'll be really insightful, but you kind of want to help them pull out, like, what are the takeaways we should be learning when you're looking at this journey? What is the moral of the story? And that could be a number of things too. So that's why I keep them kind of a certain level of abstraction by calling them the lens and the takeaways, because I don't want to necessarily be overly prescriptive of what they should be. So much as the takeaways, that lens is that sort of guiding thing that will help you measure what you're looking at when you look at a journey and whether something is living up to some set of principles or value proposition. And the takeaway is, like, what are we understanding here? We're understanding here that we need to do more of this, or we're understanding that there's an opportunity to do this that we're not doing. And I think those things help people basically use this in a way to measure whether they're succeeding on that differentiator or that unique value proposition.
Yeah, I think that's true. It sort of almost gives them a bit of a benchmark to start against. I guess what I'm finding more clients moving into, yes, we want to know who we are and what we stand for, and they have some idea around, I guess, their mission and the values that they want to portray or the behaviours. But they have no real way of acting them out. So if they put them on their website, yes, you know, we're trustworthy or blah, blah, blah. But they haven't actually internalised what that activity or proof is. And I think that's the disconnect. And I think that's what the experience mapping also provides. And the way you've explained it, that sort of seems to relate.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think, and one of the reasons why, if someone ever hears me talk about this a lot or write about this a lot, you see that I often use kind of the gerund form of it. I use say mapping the experience or experience mapping, because the last thing you ever want to do in this is try to find some consultant or some designer and say, hey, do a little bit of discovery and then go create this customer journey map or this experience map, and then all you have is an artifact. It's meant to be a very involved and participatory activity or process that has representation of the different parts of the company. So, for example, in that Rail Europe example, we had marketing involved, we had product managers involved, we had customer service, like the phone center involved, and we were literally doing kind of our creative thing with Post-it. We were constructing our map. We created a wall with butcher paper, and we set up the stages, and we kind of identified the channels, and we created that map together over the course of a few days, and we got feedback on it, and we moved things around, and it really did help when they saw opportunities evolve on the map, like things that they weren't addressing or things that they hadn't really realized from that sort of empathetic view of the customer. They started to reshape what their value proposition was. And so using the Rail Europe example, they kind of felt that their mission, their value proposition was to sell the romance of Europe by rail, like convince people that this is a great way to travel. And we realized through creating the experience map that that wasn't actually it. It was about the convenience of being able to have one stop in order to plan your whole European trip. Everyone already knew they wanted to travel by rail, but it wasn't, without them, it was really hard. I had to go to 3 or 4 different places and create this really piecemeal itinerary that I had to string together. So this one stop that represented over 35 rail lines and over a couple hundred European cities and all that, that was their value proposition. And that was something they were able to then socialize throughout the organization. It wasn't just about affecting what their actual product was and what they put out into the world for the customer. It was about what they rallied around as a company, what their North Star was then, that they knew were differentiating for them. And so it was a really good exercise for them to crystallize that and to reshape that.
I totally agree, because I didn't know that this experience map or customer journey thing existed. I just knew that when I was working with a client, a builder in Canberra in